Councilmember Anderson, I hate to say this, but I was not a big fan of Bill 5. Wanted to make sure it didn't spill over into my district. I didn't really care for Bill 11, and you were so kind to work with me and say it's not island-wide, we'll make this a microcosm, and then we worked it out. I heard you allude to that Bill 5 is applicable island-wide.
The definition of Bill 5 is applicable. That's the definition of commercial activity that should apply island-wide.
Should, but...
Not should. It's applicable for all commercial activities in a public park.
I'm looking at Bill 5, Chair, and that's where I'm looking for clarification. I voted for Bill 5 with a stipulation in concurrence with the neighborhood boards on the Leeward Coast who said, we'll support you folks in Kailua, but, we kind of like the commercial activity to a degree. We got the snorkelers, we got all that scuba diving going on, and people want the business on the west side. So I made sure that when I cast my vote, I need clarity on this. Bill 5 is only applicable to Kailua, Kalama Beach Park, talks about buses from point A to point B. It doesn't say island-wide. Now the definition, Chair, says commercial activity and gives a definition of commercial activity, gives a definition of recreational stops, but the bill says applicable to the two locations I mentioned and has nothing to do with island-wide. So I'm already at a disconnect here. I'm concerned.
That's the only definition you'll find commercial activities in any of our park rules.
Applicable to Kailua Beach Park in Kalama.
But I have limited commercial use rules that bill changed the definition of limited commercial use island-wide.
I disagree.
It would apply not just to Kailua and Kalama, but to all.
As with all your other definitions in Chapter 10, they apply, the beginning part of Chapter 10, that applies to your whole chapter.
We're trying to make a determination whether there is a ripple effect given our action with respect to Bill 5 with this new definition.
That definition applies to the entire chapter.
To all the parks. Just need to get a determination of what that ripple effect actually means.
Whenever the term commercial activities is used in Chapter 10, that would be the definition that would be applied.
So I don't want a constituent calling me all of a sudden and say, you know what? You guys did something that was supposed to affect only one part of the island. Now it's affecting me. You see what I mean? I'm trying to figure out what the impact of that was. And we need a determination from CORE. Thank you.
Are there any other parks that will be required to conduct revised EAs for activities as a result of Bill 5? That will apply island-wide is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, and again, is that your opinion, or does CORE share the opinion with you?
That's my opinion, and I can confirm with my corporation counsel. I've been working closely with her in the interpretation of Bill 5 and also Bill 11. So that is my opinion. HRS 343, and it pretty much states, and even in my rulemaking, it states that any commercial activity, new commercial activity that's brought in a park has to go through an EA analysis at a minimum. An EA analysis at a minimum by the parks director. And then at that time, that EA analysis will determine whether I should have an EA. And after the EA will determine whether I need an EIS. So I read 343 several times. Several times.
So in light of what you just said, then you don't need Bill 5 to arrive at that conclusion. HRS 343 already provides then.
I'm sorry.
HRS 343, which is state statute, already provides that an EA is required.
You're correct.
Okay, so it's not because of Bill 5 then that you've arrived at that position. You've arrived at that position after you read HRS 343.
I arrived at this position after I read 343, but it wasn't made aware of it. I wasn't made aware of it until we went through this process.
I'd like to emphasize that it's not Bill 5 that has caused the director to form an opinion that the commercial activities language in Bill 5 will apply to all parks. The fact that he's re-gone over HRS 343 has caused him to come to that conclusion. So no action on the part of the council has caused the director to have that opinion. I just want to make that clear. Does Corporation Council share Director Cabato's opinion that HRS 343 requires an environmental assessment for new commercial activities at all city beach parks?
I think I had discussed this at the Parks Committee, and in explaining what HRS 343 says, it says an environmental assessment needs to be done whenever there's a use of government property.
The way I read this, the way I understand this, the way I look at the committee reports, the way I see the testimony, it was clear in all the minutes thereof that Bill 5 was only applicable, albeit Section 10, you could say, gave a definition. The definition, according to Bill 5, the definition of commercial activity is only applicable to identified, you call it an inventory, and the inventory is identified as 2 beach parks. That, to me, members, is that anything haggling going on with lawsuits being threatened, it's clear that if the state legislature chair makes a determination by the intent, it would be applicable here as well. The intent of this council was to have Bill 5 only applicable to a specific region and a specific microcosm. It was not meant to be spilled over into the entire island.
So that said, with or without Bill 5, an EA would still be required for other parks, yes?
That's correct, because the statute applies whenever government uses government property. If the activity is not currently permitted,
Right.
and the only activities, commercial activities, which are permitted at Kailua Beach Park is the windsurfing. All the other activities are illegal, but I don't know if the council is aware, the department does issue permits island-wide for other types of activities where the activity may just stop at Kailua, like scuba, snuba. They have the right to use the parks, but it's an island-wide permit. So...
Is that a new use, though?
No. Those activities have been in place since the 1980s. Many of the activities currently governed by existing park rules were in place from the 80s.
So outside of those existing permitted activities,
New activities would have to be evaluated under 343.
and if there are any activities that are currently occurring at Kailua Beach Park outside of what's permitted, whether it be windsurfing or other activities that were permitted prior under other areas of parks rules or revised ordinance, would the EA requirement apply?
If the EA requirement would apply if the department decided to allow the activity. You know, they're evaluating, we want to do this, so they would go through the EA process.
And if the department decides not to allow the activity, then do they still need to do the EA or just let them continue to run as they are?
I guess I don't understand why would the department do an EA if they are not going to be pushing forward with the activity.
So without the EA, would the activity in question be allowed to continue? I mean,
Yeah,
obviously the
wait.
HRS says you need the EA for
No,
the...
no, I think there's a confusion. If the activity continues without a permit, they're currently illegal.
Right.
So regardless of whether you have an EA, but the EA would be done by the department to legitimize the activity, and they're not doing it right now.
But do you need the EA process to go forward prior to a permit being issued?
Yes, that's what, basically it'd be a new activity that's not currently approved by the department.
So if there's a certain activity that the department, let's say for whatever reason, they don't plan to issue a permit for it, but the activity is currently occurring,
Then it's an enforcement issue.
then would you be of the opinion then that Parks and Recreation needs to enforce on that?
I think when they have to, they're not required, but there's a violation of the ordinances, so it becomes an enforcement issue that Parks needs to work with HPD on enforcement.
But then they should enforce, correct? Rather than just let the activity continue even if they're not going to permit it. If it's not permitted,
I think our position is, if there's a violation, there should always be, the department needs to follow up on the violation. How they handle it, that's the department's determination.